5, and I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This is Chris Barnes from the University of Florida, and I see we have a lot of new people on the call. Oh, there's Alexander coming. So, Alexander is going to be giving a great talk next week. I know that we were supposed to do it this week, but um, he asked if he could do it next week, and I said sure. So he's going to give us a talk next week and talk about VIVO in Brazil and lattes, really cool project they're working on down there, some of his semantic web work. So this week, kind of an impromptu discussion that Ted and I had been working on for a while. Not a while, I guess, but the last couple weeks, talking about it. And I wanted to bring it to this group and see what they thought. So basically, this is a problem that I'm trying to tackle here at the University of Florida. And I wanted to see what some other people thought, or if they had any suggestions or ideas. So basically, um, I think about a month ago, a month and a half ago, we started putting our grants into VIVO. And as you can see, VIVO at UF, we have about 18,000 grants in there. And one of the things that we started to realize as we started to try and make some visualizations and try and do some queries is that the granting organizations that were in there, like National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, they were inconsistent because there was a lot of inconsistent data that had been entered by people and by automated processes in the past. And so we tried to find a good list of funding organizations, and we found some public data on funding organizations, and we put it in. And so, as you can see, oh, someone's got me on super high, so we're getting some feedback. Whoever's typing, yeah. If you're there we go. Thank you. So basically, you can see here that we've got now this special category called funding organization, and we have somewhere around approximately 6,000 funding organizations in VIVO. And if you look, let's do a look here. Sloan Foundation. I've been using them as my example. And so if I go look at the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, this is basically what we have on the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. We've got the grants that came from that foundation, and we don't really know much more about it. And so at the same time that I'd been looking at the funding organization data that we had, which really consisted of nothing more than their names, and then we used that to link up to the grant ID from our system. And let me see if I can show you that. Yes, this is the contract number. So we manually link the contract number to a funder identifier, which goes with this guy, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And so we were able to make that. So, now we can do some basic things where now when you click on Sloan Foundation, you can see all the grants that were awarded. But I wanted to kind of go to the next level. So I went and talked about this question, and I've had this idea for a while. I don't know if you guys can see this. Can everybody see the symbol map here? Yes. Okay, good. So basically, for a while, we've been looking at Mike Bostock's D3 libraries. And if you haven't seen those, that's pretty interesting. It's something to take a look at. I don't know who's taking notes here, but if someone could put a link to D3 in there, it's something that's probably worth looking at. Anyway, it's a great generalized library for making visualizations in JavaScript, which is another good way of saying making visualizations you can share over the web. So the long and short of that is ever since I saw Mike Bostock's symbol map, I've been obsessed with trying to figure out, could I take all the grants that we have at the University of Florida, like these 6 that you see over here, and make a symbol map where the intensity or the diameter of the circles were based on the geographic location of the funder. And basically the human way of saying that was, could I make a map that showed where all of the funding agencies come from that fund the University of Florida, and also where are they, where are they the largest and where are they the smallest? And typically I would imagine people could guess there'll probably be a big circle around Washington D.C. because we're a big NIH funded public university, but where are some of the other ones? So anyway, as I started to dig into this, I started to talk to Ted Lawless of Brown about it. And he said, "Hey, have you looked at FundRef?" And I said, "Well, no, I haven't ever heard of FundRef." And he said, "Yeah, we'll go look at FundRef." So FundRef happens to be this really cool registry of funding organizations built by Crossref. And what they've done is they've gone out and created, didn't mean to click that, they've created DOIs or identifiers for all the funding organizations. So if you go and download this information here at their FundRef registry, and I did, and I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm hoping this is, let me make it a little bigger. So here is the, oh, did I just lose it here? Sloan. Here's the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and they have created, I believe right here is the DOI for those guys. Go back over here. And they give back some JSON. So again, this is another API kind of thing that's going to be neat to use, that I'll be able to use to go through this data over here, which is XML RDF. And as you can see, they're using Scott's concept. And I'll get into that in a second with my questions. But basically, I found a data set. And what was interesting about it was that it was in RDF already, and that they had provided an identifier. And that, as I scroll over here, the identifier is linked to a DOI, and that they had some good information about the type, that it's a foundation. I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me blow this up here. So you can see it's a foundation. They put in some geographic information, and at first I was like, wow, awesome. I found all the geographic information I'm going to need. And so I'm like, they got the state and the country, and how much more am I going to need? So as I started to go back, and I'm going to go back over here, as I started to dig into this and I started to do Mike Bostock has a really great tutorial called Let's Make a Map. And he walks you through the whole process of generating these maps. And as I went through the tutorial on how to make one of these symbol maps, and I started working with this map tutorial, I realized that I needed something more than actually the just this data, the geoname data for the state. I needed like street address. I needed the latitude and longitude in order to put the maps. These are all my assumptions, by the way, but in looking at all these were created using lats and longes, right? So you were able to code these and then use it in part of the library to draw the map. So as I started to pull that thread, I was like, wow, great. I don't have the latitude and longitude. Not only that, I don't have the street address. So how am I going to figure that out? So I went back and I started looking at the data again, and I was looking down here and I noticed that they had the tax ID. And so I was like, okay. So I started pulling that string, and I went and I found another public data source called citizenaudit.org. And you'll notice that, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I'll highlight it up here. In citizenaudit.org, now they don't have RDF, but they do have something, they do have some bulk data, and they also have it, the format of their URLs is that if you put the tax ID after the URL, they will pull up this semi-structured table of data. And so I'm going to go do that with Sloan Foundation. I'm going to copy the tax ID out of here. And I'm going to put it over here. And boom, now I have the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. But more importantly, now I have the address. And so I took the address and I started looking at the W3C, and W3C has a geolocation API. So basically, they have a geolocation API where you can pass in things like, and they're using an ontology called WGS84, but you can pass in the address information, which would include the zip code, which I have the address, and I also have the zip code, and I can get back latitude and longitude. And so those are the pieces of data that I've put together. One of the things, so there's a couple things that I've been struggling with. One is I've been able to, I'm using a Python library called Beautiful Soup, and it's kind of a web scraping tool. And I've been able to scrape the data out of this table, and I've been able to link it, kind of loosely linked based on the EIN or the tax ID to my FundRef data source. Okay. And one of the questions that I'm bringing to the group here is that what do I do with this data? I haven't been able to find an ontology to put this data in, but it seems very important that I would want to attribute this back to the fact that this is data. I'm sorry, I skipped over this part. This data is Form 990 PF data. So citizenonaudit.org actually went and digitized all of the IRS data for all of these nonprofit foundations. So they don't just have the Sloan Foundation, they have every other foundation that in the year 2012 filed a Form 990 PF with the IRS. So this is pretty valuable data if I wanted to do something even beyond making my symbol map. If I wanted to look at another symbol map that looked at I think they've got total assets here. So, how big is the foundation that's giving us grants? Who is the biggest foundation? Sloan Foundation has $1.2 billion in assets. So that's another interesting visualization that if I can figure out a way to put this data together with my funding organization data, again, back from here in VIVO, then I can probably do something pretty interesting with it. But what I'm struggling with is that I want to keep the fact that this was made by citizenonaudit.org with the data. I want, but they're not hosting it as RDF. And even then, and also, even though that FundRef is created this RDF XML file, which I showed you guys over here, right? And they're using SCOS and they're using, sorry, let me go up the top here. They're using some of these other common ontologies like SCOS. They're using their own ontology, which is non-resolvable. And they're not hosting this data as linked open data, or basically they just have a download where you can download the file. So again, how do I get that into my VIVO but still do some? Sorry, go ahead.
Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, they are not using their own ontology. They're using SCOS, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they are using one standard ontology to represent concepts. So this SCOS is a good choice.
So what do you think I should do as far as so SCOS represents part of it, but they've represented some of the other data using specifically the tax ID. So if I go back down to Sloan Foundation, you'll see they're using SVF, which go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they're using also some properties of what's this one SVF.
Right. So if you go back up to the header, you'll see that SVF looks like their own internal right here. So it's their own internal namespace. And so you think like, oh, okay, cool. Well, let me go to that. So that's what you get. So so you guys can see basically I've got some structured data. That's already been turned into RDF XML, so that's one. And then I've got somewhere down the pipeline, I've got a little bit even less structured data as far as this data from Citizen Audit. This comes in the form of data that's extracted out of IRS Form 990s. And then I've got, another question about whose geographic standard do I use? Do I use W3C and WGS84? Or do I use geonames.org? which that's what FundRef is using and Crossref is using. So it's kind of interesting. It's I've basically got three major questions. One is anybody else doing latitude and longitude? And if they are, what ontology are they using? And at what level do they associate those values? Do they associate it right down at the organization level, or is it up higher? Is it like there's one geographic point in the universe and everything else gets associated with that? Those are some of the questions. And then again, the whole thing about this is I want to make a really cool map when I'm done. So that's kind of my problem. So who's going to help me? I'm smiling. No one can see me smiling. Actually, Ted has been a great help already. Ted is.
So
Go ahead, guys.
so for the for the how to represent this data, I think the question is who could be responsible for maintaining such ontology. So I think that's a very good idea to suggest an ontology and vocabulary to represent this form.
Mm-hmm.
But but again, so who had responsible to maintain such thing? So maybe the first step would be to contact the owners of this website and identify if they have any idea of provide the data in more structural format. That could be the first step before trying to suggest one such format and helping and create such ontology. I don't know. So I think this is an open problem in a bunch of different domains. So whenever you face a situation like that, so you have the data and you realize that that data could be much better made represented and made available as our RDF format. And sometimes we face this fact that not anybody's using RDF. So you see, I think first we have to contact the guys that are behind this website and identify that if they have any motivation to provide the data in more structured format. Maybe it's just about maybe they reply, yeah, we are interested and we don't know how to, so we can help them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was what I was thinking. Was their first question would be, yeah, sure, that's great. How do we do that?
Yeah, well, if they reply with this message, then we at least we know that anything that we can will will do will be useful, will be I mean will be maintained. So because it's hard to start to think about an ontology or any vocabulary and then figure out that in the end nobody will use it. So for me, the first question must be this one. You use if I help you, you use this. Okay, so let's think about how to help you. And of course, well, we can search the web, but I think probably there are some ideas about ways to represent generic forms in RDF. So I can't search about this, but for sure, someone have already think about different forms and general vocabulary to represent forms.
Well, one of the questions I had was, is anybody here use SCOS to kind of represent unstructured data like this that didn't have a permanent ontology?
Well, I think that go much further than SCOS.
So I mean, this is one of the in the past, the way we've solved this problem is we've made local extensions to our ontology, and we have a UF Vivo sub ontology where we just kind of add these things. So at first I was like, I'll just add those as local extensions for the data that I want to keep. But then that doesn't help anybody else, right? Then that doesn't solve the problem of if I what I'm hoping is that I can create a good data set based on FundRef's organization list, and that this can become RDF that other people can digest um, into their Vivo, so that at someday we're all using the same Sloan Foundation, right? So that we all have the same DOI reference and it's all the same. So I could theoretically make a symbol map of funding organizations across multiple vivos. Kind of the same idea for what we do for countries right now. And I know that this has been talked about before and that we've had other things, but I think it's more timely now. I think that this is one of the ways that we start solving the how do we link our vivos together is to start tackling some of the challenging ideas about how do we even share reference data. So John Corson Reichert also said that there's a similar problem with educational institutions, and um, he talked about UCosmic, and UCosmic apparently is a State University of New York research organization has put together a project, and that project supports a curated list of universities. And so, why that would be important would be again, I was asked a question like, "Hey, could you make a map that shows where all of our faculty at the University of Florida got their graduate degrees?" You know, where do they come from? Does everybody that works here, all the faculty members that have PhDs and MDs, did they all graduate from somewhere in the Northeast? And that's a great question. But one of the things that we struggle with is that we might have the name Harvard, but I don't actually have the latitude and longitude or the address of Harvard. So again, as we try to curate more or get more detailed data about some of these reference things, I'm thinking that that would be good for not just me to figure out, but also me to figure out so that I can share it with Paul and with Ted and with Alexander. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on this. If they think it's a good idea, I mean that's kind of what I'm looking for too. Is this a good idea, or is this just kind of a it's not time for that yet at the community?
So, Chris, I think it's a great idea and a great example of sort of the things that people might want to do with Vivo after they've had, modeled the types, the typical types of data. So I think you're ahead of a lot of us in that you're sort of ready to work on this. And I'm just wondering if anybody else on the in the call here has done something similar where they've sort of mashed up um, data from different sources, and maybe you haven't tackled all of these difficult questions, but maybe you've done something minimal. Is, has anyone has anyone have any experience doing this, kind of mixing data from multiple sources and loading it into Vivo?
Well, yes. In Brazil, I use data from from the digital library in my university, from Lattes platform, from the government, from data set about the rank of journals, also provided by the government. So yeah, I have already faced a couple of times this situation.
And are you um, addressing some of Chris's questions like the provenance issue? Do you have any sort of strategies for being able to link
Yes,
the data that you now have? Okay, go ahead.
well, again, as I said, the problem is that it's not the problem. Well, one of the problems, of course, come up with a good representation and define a good vocabulary to represent the data. But this is not the main problem. The main difficult part is how to identify who will be the responsible to maintain this stuff. So in my case in Brazil, uh, for instance, I create a vocabulary to represent the rank of journals. I each year they provide an updated list of the rank. Actually, they update the list at each 3 years. And what I do is to whenever we have a new list, I create a new RDF and update the whole stuff and put in the GitHub repository. I, I never try to keep track of how many users go there and all the files, but the fact is that I'm doing the job to maintain this stuff. I don't know for how long I'll do this, but I assume that nobody will do so. I keep doing. But the good way to go is to actually have the, the organization that is responsible to produce the data. This one should be involved and provide it in a structure format, RDF with a definition of the vocabulary together the data and things like that. So the problem is how we can address this, how we can involve the responsibles to create the data and provide better formats to people download the data. So that's the point. I mean, it's difficult to engage people in doing what we expect that could be better if they do it for everybody.
No, I agree, and so one of the suggestions I got from someone when I asked the question about where do we host data, and they pointed me to DataHub.io, and there's some data sets out there, and it's really interesting that they've provided this service. So it is pretty neat. One of the problems that I see with this is as I look through some of these data sets, they're not really they're in a position to host or reference repositories that create things like fixed files. So you're right, Alexander. They're not in a position here to host RDF or to host um, linked open data. And so the question is, you know, how do we do that? Has anybody come upon any repository? If I solve all these problems, and how do we share this if I can't get citizen audit and I can't get fundref to actually host their data as linked open data, is it okay to just put this out on a web server as an XML RDF file or as an N3 file that people can get to? Is that enough? And that was just a general question. What do you guys think?
Oh, I think that's the first step. So in this case, we have these two different projects, right? We have the citizenoudit.org and we have the fundref. So what actually you created, it's a new resource that's merged of these two data, or you create not, but you plan to create. You want to merge the information that the citizenoudit.org created with
Yes.
the fundref dataset. And this
Yes.
will be an extended dataset that both websites could be interested in. So better create this and then let them know, okay, here a new data set that merged you two guys. What do you think about this? And then they will decide, okay, nice, or no, we want to keep it separated and thanks very much, but we will not use it. But yes, I think if you have something concrete to show them, then people will be able to somehow evaluate it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Make something concrete to show them.
I agree. I agree. And this, I think, is even maybe a like if we focus just on the two sort of data points, you've got the name of the organization and an identifier from FundRef, and then you have the latitude and longitude from Citizen Audit. Both of these organizations are actively maintaining this data, maybe just not in the format that you need for your use case. So I think this is actually a better situation than other ones I can imagine where the data has, in this case, I think the data will be kept up to date.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if, and I hadn't even thought about that as a twist, as to maybe if I show them how to put it in that format, or I give them a link that maybe each site will want to link to each other, or in essence, one of them will
Yeah,
take one.
the good thing that you can do is actually one interesting thing is that once you show that actually, yeah, for instance, if you create a GitHub repository and put there a script that from the I'm seeing here that the cityaudit.org put their data available in Postgres dump and also in CSV file, right? So
Yeah,
I think these are the two formats they use. So maybe one simple script that convert this CSV file to RDF and show them that this you have two different RDF that could be maintained and separated, but since they both data is in RDF, then we can easily merge them and use for queries or things or for your use case for displayed data in a map.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they will be able to actually identify the value that you are adding in their data.
That's a good point. I could probably also make the map or visualization code available to them too.
Exactly, because then make the motivation be concrete to them.
And also in your position at UF, you're already you're sort of do you're publishing a Sparkle endpoint and linked open data, so you're being a good data citizen too. So all the extra information about people at UF that are related to these organizations, you're already publishing. So you're not only adding the value of linking the two different data sets, but you also have all of this other data about researchers.
Right. Will allow them to link to other information about those researchers. Yeah, it's a good point. I guess what I'm still struggling with though is that as I agree with you that I'd like to take that manifest file and create a script for them to turn it into RDF, but I haven't found a good ontology. And I'm gonna go to the ontology call tomorrow at 2, and I'm going to ask them some of the same ontology questions. So we'll see. I mean, if I had an ontology that I could already use, I'd be farther along. I mean, that's kind of what I'm struggling with. Like, what is the right thing to do? Um, like I was telling Ted, I've resisted the urge because I really just want to make the map. I'm really excited about the map, and so I told Ted, I've really resisted the urge to just go dump this into CSV or into MySQL tables or things that I know how to use and just make my map. You know, because there's an API for getting. You can see right here. There's an API for getting the data from Citizen Audit. I mean, with Python, I could get all that stuff real quick and dump it out. But then I said to myself, well, if I don't solve this problem of when I come across unstructured data with no ontology, then how are other people supposed to solve it? You know, Alexander, that some of that data you said you got from the government, what did you do? What was there ontologies already existed to represent it that made it easy for you to put it into RDF?
Well, for some of them, yes, I reuse some ontologies, but for example, for the journal rank, I create my own ontology. So I create the properties, I create the classes, and
Okay.
made it. I mean, I'm quite sure that someone in the future will come up with a better way to describe the data. But for the first step, we have to start from any point, right? You have to decide. And if you cannot find an ontology, you can just create some properties and classes and define a first version, and that's it.
Okay.
We just need to be consistent. We don't need to. There is no better ontology. There is no way to. There is no way to compare ontologies and say this one is better than the other.
Right.
If both are consistent, so of course one in the future will be more general, will be more. Uh, People can compare in different ways, but in the end, for the first step, we have to have the first version so people can criticize. So
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering is if I'm going to have to create a like a small ontology to deal with this so that I can keep moving forward, and then I'm okay with having someone come back and go, you shouldn't have done that. You should use this ontology, and I could change it. I'm okay with that. I see that as kind of being an unspoken problem that a lot of people are facing. I don't think when they see, they spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to go through the existing ontology and they look through other ontologies, but when they can't readily find something, they don't know what to do next. And so I can see trying to solve that or come up with like a methodology on how to handle that as being really helpful for people that want to consume data, especially in applications and tools where it's like I'm trying to make this app, happens to be a map, but I'm trying to make an app that I don't want to put some of this data back into Vivo, right? As far as I'm concerned, I want FundRef to keep maintaining the resources for me, perhaps. So I see this as as a challenge. What do you think of all this, Paul? Would you like to have latitude and longitude for all your funding organizations?
I would. We're focused more on performance, but I do like the idea of mashups. One of the ones that I've been thinking about for a while would be to take mesh terms from people's published papers and plot them on a graph to show what countries people are expert in. I also did a little preliminary analysis to see what foreign language papers or people had. I thought there would be a ton, but there are only a handful in order to determine what languages people spoke. So if you wanted to go to the resident expert on Portuguese, German, or whatever, you'd know who to turn to. But now I think that would be pretty easily accomplished by just looking at the country of someone's graduate degree. So it's more often that someone has a graduate degree in a foreign country that they write papers in foreign language.
Oh, interesting. So the uCosmic data. Ted, did you take a longer look at the uCosmic stuff than I did? I haven't had a chance to look at too much of that.
I haven't looked too deeply, and it's not clear if there's a data download that's shareable, but it seems to be a good resource that's trying to solve kind of information about universities around the world.
Well, I hadn't even thought of the use case that would be great to know if someone got their graduate degree from a university in Portugal. Odds are that they might speak some Portuguese, right? Especially if they got an advanced degree there, but maybe not. So that's an interesting case, Paul. What about you, Jim? Any insights into all this? What do you think? We barking up the wrong trees?
Okay, first trying to figure out how to unmute myself. No, I don't have any particular interest in the geolocation data in per se. That's not really my field of interest. But this whole question of how do you store the data? How do you make it available? How do you be a good net citizen? Yeah, I think is really wide open.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'd love to hear what John Ferreira or some of those other guys that work on AgriVivo think. I wonder if they're also merging other data sources in with their Vivo data.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not really a data guy as much as I am I handle the back end. So I really don't have much opinion on this except to say, yeah, it is kind of nice to consider these questions and to ask. I don't know, like we've I think this ties in with the question of using URIs, common URIs across Vivo instances. We everybody has their own URI for Harvard. If we say that so and so is employed by Harvard, wouldn't it be nice if we could have some sort of recorded or registry of commonly used URIs, funding agencies, that sort of thing, and it seems to tie in here. We want to be distributed. Everybody. I mean, that's the whole nature of the web, right? Is that data can be found any place, but still there needs to be some sort of central dictionary.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some. It's kind of interesting. I mean, so
Alert from calendar.
oh, sorry about that.
CTSIT budget meeting.
There we go. Sorry about that. It's FundRef and their DOIs, like I showed before. Oh, where did I put that? So Fundraft has DOIs they've created, which is kind of a, that's one way to show. And they've got a DOI for Harvard, just like they have a DOI for the Sloan Foundation, right? And they're spitting out JSON. But then there's same as .org. And so I think they have they have a JSON interface so people can register URIs with same as that match this. So if there's another Sloan Foundation one, they could put it here. And it's kind of like there's a couple places that are kind of emerging as that central repository for doing the the sharing of the co-identifiers. I guess I don't know what to call them. Just knowing that my Harvard's the same as your Harvard. So that's going to be an interesting challenge too, because there's not a lot of I haven't heard a lot of guidance on what's the right thing to do. Should we be registering all of our URIs at same as? Should we be getting Crossref to do them? I mean, there's also another one. I think Patrick from RPI, when he did his presentation, talked about another site that gives out identifiers. Can't remember the name of it. So yeah. Well, that's about all I had, Ted. Everybody can see my interesting questions here. And again, at the end of the day, I just want to make a map. Where'd my map go? Where's my map? There's my map. I want to make a map.
Here, Chris, what again is your use case, your business case?
I would like to know based on grant dollars. So I want to make these bubbles big by grant dollars. So I want to take the funding organizations, and so if this bubble here represented some foundation in Miami, I would want to make the size of it based on how many grant dollars they gave UF in 2012.
In order to try to shape that money tree more, or
I want to see where most of our funding comes from geographically.
Got it. But in order to do what?
It was an interesting question to say, does most of our fund? Somebody said all of our funding comes from Washington, and I said, are you sure about that?
Oh.
And they were like, well, I don't know. And so we were like, well, how would we answer that question? And part of it was, well, we have all the funding organizations in VIVO. We could actually go and make a map of where they're all from. And then as I started pulling the string, I'm like, well, we don't have geographic information on these organizations. So we can't make a map. So we don't really know where they are, what country they're in, or.
Another thing so it sounds like, yeah, just answering basic questions, trying to target additional areas, or maybe some foundations are distributed. That's an interesting problem.
It is. They are distributed, and one of the assumptions that I was going to go with to start with was whatever address that they put on their Form 990 to the IRS.
All right.
So,
and then another possible thing, Chris, is if you looked at how funding changed over time. So if you saw like one area was growing or something like that, that might be interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the next kind of thing that I could bring in is I could bring in a map where I could do, because UF is a land grant university, right? And we've had a gradual shift from being funded by a lot of like the USDA and lots of organizations like that to now we have a really huge healthcare portfolio. That change happened over time. So yeah, it would be neat to see one of those maps where the bubbles. They make bubble symbol maps that I've seen that show things like the growth of McDonald's or Walmart, right? So you can see bubbles pop up over time as it animates from left to right. And you can do that with D3, by the way. So yes, that's another thing is if you have geographic information, you can go and make maps like that where you can show the growth of things over time.
That's hardcore.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay. I just sent out a link to an ontology that I came across when I was still in library school. And I don't know if it covers all of the data properties that you're looking at in these two sources, but it seems to cover a fair amount. It also has a bit about people stuff that VIVO already covers, but it might be of use in getting started. And that being said, my master's thesis was working on fanning out a disciplinary metadata standards directory. So I'll give you guys that link too. It's a little more on the science side, but if you're ever kind of looking for an ontology to use and not quite sure, it breaks it up into different disciplines and it's a little easier to navigate instead of just searching the web. So.
Thank you very much, Christina. That's exactly what I was hoping to find from this call. And after looking at it for like 10 seconds here, I'm like, wow, how did I not find that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I spent an entire semester going through people's. So the second link to the ontology page also has a form if you want to add to it. That's what I spent many hours of my life going through people's additions to the metadata standards, but they're still adding to it and I think building it out and trying to make it into a wiki. But you come across really interesting stuff that you never know when you can use it.
Very cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you think of my idea about making the symbol map for the funding organizations? Sounds like you have an opinion.
I think that's, yeah, that would be really great. So right now I'm at the International Food Policy Research Institute in DC, and we work on funders, donors. So being able to visualize that would be pretty cool. And then, and then not only for us, but we're a member in a consortium, so being able to see that and possibly how that compares across the projects that span across different centers and in comparison to the other institutes and centers as well. It'd be a lot easier for the people who aren't dealing directly with their project and their research to kind of see where everything comes from, because it's a pretty big spread of who donates and from what countries for what projects. It'd be really interesting to see it instead of have to read it, I guess.
Yeah, I've also thought that the inverse of this would be really cool for an individual funding organization to kind of see geographically where their money spreads out over time, and also FundRef links publications to these funders. So
yeah, that's
you could do
awesome.
You could do a symbol map where the bubbles are the number of publications published by year by funding organization, or you know. But I gotta have their geolocation data.
Yeah, I think the ontology that I shared with you guys, I know it goes down to the city level. I don't know if it gets down any further, but it pulls from, if you go to the very bottom, you can see the ontologies it uses, and I'm sure that in one of those you can get down a little further if you needed to, but I don't know if city and state would work.
Cool.
The
Very cool.
problem is that it looks like there exist some variations of the 990 form, right? So I don't know how complex it will be to map all these versions of the form to this ontology, but I don't know. Maybe this basic information, because we have this 990 PF,
Yeah.
but also easy. I found a couple of different versions.
Right.
The suffix of the form. So
yeah,
how they.
I just saw through here they have the P, the PF, and the T.
Anyway, we can just map the basic info. That should be most important part that come on 12 forms in a row.
I was kind of shocked when I first went through here. I mean, this is some pretty interesting information that people would want. I was surprised that there wasn't an ontology. I mean, this is kind of Dun and Bradstreet kind of thing. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's an organization that keeps up this kind of data, so you can buy their service and find out, like for credit purposes, why what where a company's from and how big they are, how long they've been around. And I was like, wow, that what great information to be modeled semantically. And I haven't been able to find anything yet. So thank you, Christina. That was a good. Now I've got somewhere to go look at some stuff. But I am not an ontologist either, so that's probably why I struggle. And neither am I a library person, so I've got two strikes against me. I'm just a data guy.
Yeah, that could be a very interesting project for undergraduate too.
Well, hey, it's 1:56 here, and in the last couple of minutes, Alexander, you want to give people a warm up for your talk coming up in 2 weeks?
Well, not sure if I'm already set up my mind about what I will talk about, so better wait for 2 weeks.
Well, tell them where
Yeah,
you're.
but-
I mean, so not everybody here knows you like I know you. So you're from Brazil and you work for.
Well, I work for IBM Research and for Foundation College Getúlio Vargas Foundation, and one of my projects is that related to Vivo to create this Vivo instance for Getúlio Vargas Foundation, and we have just set up this last week. We set up the first version of this installation with a bunch of data that I uploaded after compiling for 3 different sources of data from LATS platform, from the digital library, and from some internal systems from the Getúlio Vargas Foundation. And well, I don't know. I can talk about the whole workflow, what kind of tools I used, what kind of problems I faced. So that's my idea. I haven't structured yet very well, but the whole idea would be to basically talk about what we did these last 3 or 4 weeks, and what kind of tools we worked with, and what are the points that I really would like to improve.
I, for one, am excited to hear about that because I think that hearing about problems that other people face and how they've tried to solve them helps us when we try to solve similar problems. So I think that's going to be, anything you talk about in that area is going to be great. And thank you again for agreeing to come on and give a talk. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's good to share problems and of course have some ideas back from the community.
Well, thank you everybody for coming to our call, and sorry we got started a little late. That was my fault, and I hope that this was interesting. And thank you again to everybody that's new on the call this week, Christina and Steve and Anusha. I really appreciate you guys coming, and definitely be there in 2 weeks, same time, for Alexander from IBM Research Brazil is going to give us a talk.
And also, if you would like to present an idea like Chris did today, feel free to send me an email and we can, work out a time or just start a conversation about it.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.